Wednesday of the 29th week in Ordinary Time.
A reading from the letter of St. Paul to the Romans. Brothers and sisters, sin must not reign over your mortal bodies, so that you obey their desires. And do not present the parts of your bodies to sin as weapons for wickedness, but present yourselves to God as raised from the dead to life, and the parts of your bodies to God as weapons for righteousness. For sin is not to have any power over you, since you are not under the law but under grace. What then? Shall we sin because we are not under the law but under grace? Of course not. Do you not know that if you present yourselves to someone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one you obey, either of sin, which leads to death, or of obedience, which leads to righteousness? But thanks be to God that, although you were once slaves of sin, you have become obedient from the heart to the pattern of teaching to which you were entrusted. Freed from sin, you have become slaves of righteousness. The word of the Lord.
The responsorial psalm. The response is, "Our help is in the name of the Lord." Had not the Lord been with us, let Israel say, had not the Lord been with us, when men rose up against us? Then would they have swallowed us alive, when their fury was inflamed against us. Our help is in the name of the Lord. Then would the waters have overwhelmed us, the torrent would have swept over us. Over us then would have swept the raging waters. Blessed be the Lord, who did not leave us a prey to their teeth. Our help is in the name of the Lord. We were rescued like a bird from the fowler's snare. Broken was the snare, and we were freed. Our help is in the name of the Lord, who made heaven and earth. Our help is in the name of the Lord.
A reading from the Holy Gospel according to Luke. Jesus said to his disciples, "Be sure of this, if the master of the house had known the hour when the thief was coming, he would not have let his house be broken into. You also must be prepared, for in an hour you do not expect, the Son of Man will come." Then Peter said, "Lord, is this parable meant for us or for everyone?" And the Lord replied, "Who then is the faithful and prudent steward, whom the master will put in charge of his servants, to distribute the food allowance at the proper time? Blessed is that servant whom his master on arrival finds doing so. Truly I say to you, he will put him in charge of all his property. But if that servant says to himself, 'My master is delayed in coming,' and begins to beat the men servants and the maid servants, to eat and drink and get drunk, then that servant's master will come on an unexpected day and at an unknown hour, and will punish the servant severely, and assign him a place with the unfaithful. That servant who knew his master's will, but did not make preparations nor act in accord with his will, shall be beaten severely. And the servant who was ignorant of his master's will, but acted in a way deserving of a severe beating, shall be beaten only lightly. Much will be required of the person entrusted with much, and still more will be demanded of the person entrusted with more." The Gospel of the Lord.
The first reading comes from Romans 6:12-18. Paul first of all says that we can't let sin reign in our bodies. We're subject to bodily passion, we're weak, and so easily we would give in to those acts of selfishness, the acts of self-hate that we call sin. But that will bring us only death. Jesus has given us life, but we have to live in that life. We have to embrace Jesus, and that means dying to certain types of conduct, certain attitudes, because those attitudes only bring death. Now, because we're dead to sin and we're dead to the law, does that mean we can do whatever we want? Absolutely not. Paul says it in Galatians that doing anything we want means that we're a slave again to our bodily passions. Libertarianism is not what God calls for. Rather, we have to make ourselves a slave to love, a slave to life, a slave to God. We have to be obedient. That's one of the words that appears over and over again in Paul's and Luke's writings, that by obedience we are living a true act of freedom because we give ourselves freely to that which the Father has asked us to do. Again, sometimes in our world we think that if we do what others tell us we have to do, then that somehow robs us of freedom. But if we do it because we freely want to embrace the will of the other, the love of the other, then we're not slaves, we're truly free. The Gospel is from Luke 12:39-48. It continues the idea of being ready whenever the Son of Man would return in glory. That if a servant waiting for his master begins to mistreat the other servants, then he'll certainly be punished. But if he treats them well, not having a clue when the master would be returned, he'll be rewarded. And then at the end, it says that the one who has received a lot is expected. We don't know what gifts others have received, and very often we don't even know what gifts we've received. God will only judge us and others according to what He has given us. Therefore, we shouldn't judge others because we don't know what gifts or weaknesses they've received. Leave it in God's hands. And likewise, even ourselves, we do the best we can, then we trust in the mercy of God. Though we don't try to act like an accountant before God, figuring out that I did this sin, so God must punish me for that. That's not an act of love. That's an act of commerce. Jesus taught us that our relationship with God should be one of love and trust. And that love and trust certainly does mean that we should try to be the best person we can be. But it doesn't mean that we're doing it out of fear or out of a sense that we owe God. Rather, it should be out of a sense that we are one with God. We are obedient to the Father. And may God bless us.